I am reading this biography right now, the biography of Winston Churchill called Walking with Destiny. It is a big fat boy. And as I'm reading this, I wanted to read about somebody who went through extraordinarily difficult external situations and rose to the occasion, right? I like to get inspiration from these historical figures who've overcome incredible odds. But there's something about this book. There's something in this book. I'm not finished with it by any means. I'm like 150 pages in, so I got another year to go. But there was something in this book that I did not expect to find that I found incredibly inspiring and incredibly tactical that we can use to become better communicators. Because one of the things about Winston Churchill that everybody says is that he is one of the most powerful orators the world has ever seen. That was one of his gifts, his abilities during World War II to overcome the Nazis, the Hitler equation was he was able to rally a nation to the threat. And he did that through his words. And something I did not know about Winston Churchill, granted, I didn't know a lot about him going into this book other than that he was the Prime Minister of England during the World War II, right? But in here, he broke down a 5-step process, what he calls the scaffolding of rhetoric. It's a 5-step process that he uses to create incredible speeches. So if you want to become an incredible orator, an incredible storyteller, an incredible speaker, this is the guy to learn from. And here's the first thing. Let me just put aside real quick the scaffolding of rhetoric. I'm going to share what those 5 steps are. But first, this is crazy. Often when people ask me, like, because I do a lot of public speaking, they ask me, how much work do you put into each one of your speeches? I'm like, I put in 2 hours of rehearsal for every 1 minute I'm going to be speaking. So if it's a 60-minute speech, that means I put in 120 hours of rehearsal. 120 hours. That is way more than most people are willing to give. That's like 3 full weeks of 40 hours a week work, right? So that's the baseline that I put in. And I thought that was a lot. But then I look at a guy like Winston and I realize that there are levels to this game and that I am just in the pee-wees and the pee-wee league. Because throughout up to World War II, here's a crazy fact. Churchill delivered 1,700 speeches, 1,700 speeches. Each one was on average more than 5,000 words. That's a lot of words. Each one was completely unique. He very rarely repeated himself, and he memorized each one of them. 1,700 speeches. I did the math on this. It was like 8 million words worth of public speaking that he had done up to World War II. Not even beyond World War II, right? And I was like, that is a wild fact. In fact, and to deliver these speeches, he traveled 80, what's the number here? I have it written down. He traveled 82,000 miles combined. So that's 3 times the circumference of the earth. I'm telling you this to give you a baseline. You're not going to become a great orator, a great speaker, if you do not put in the work, if you do not put in the reps. Now, full transparency, one of the reasons I started this podcast many years ago, and one of the forebearers of this podcast was simply I wanted to have a platform to put in the reps. I didn't want to travel 82,000 miles and go to 1,700 different stages. If I could sit down and I could speak to the camera every day for the next 1,700 days, I can get the same effect that Winston did, right? Now, granted, that was my mindset before I read about Winston. Now I read about this and I'm like, this podcast, as of today, has like what? Maybe
almost 800.
About 800 episodes. So we've released an episode every day for the last 800 days. I'm not even halfway to Winston's number yet. That's buck wild. Anywho, okay. So if you want to be great, that's the first thing, is just recalibrate in your mind how much work it takes to become great at that thing and be willing to put in the effort, and it will be worth it. So let's talk about the scaffolding of rhetoric. There's 5 things that he says you need to have if you want to have a great speech. The first thing is well-chosen words. Well-chosen words. So here's a line from one of his speeches. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Simple words. but powerful words. The connection of we will fight in the fields, we will fight in the streets, we'll fight you wherever you want to fight. We will fight you and we will never stop fighting. It's just so powerful when you find the right words. It doesn't mean the big words. Sometimes it's the unique word, but it could be a small word. The word that makes you go, oh, interesting. One of the words that Winston would use quite a lot is foe. We will conquer this foe, not enemy, because everybody knows the word enemy, but the word foe, it conjures this image of something older, ancient, and primordial, this foe. And it gets people out of their regular pattern of listening to you and what they expect you to say. Oh, we're gonna beat the enemy, right? We're gonna beat the enemy. But if instead we're gonna defeat this foe, it hits very differently. Well-chosen words. That's first thing. Second is carefully crafted sentences. I think this is probably the hallmark of a great communicator. And when a sentence is crafted in a compelling manner, most people will not notice it. It'll be completely invisible, but it hits very hard. For instance, this sentence here is, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. It's just so simple. But the way that he structured that sentence is, I have nothing to offer, and then he tells you all the things he has to offer. And then in the end, you're like, oh, he has his blood, his sweat, his tears. What more does a human really have to give other than that? It's just a beautiful sentence. First, reframes and says, I have nothing to give except for everything. And most of your time and energy in, I would say, creating a compelling speech should be on the sentence level and on the word level. Everything behind this is like the cream on top. So focus on well-chosen words, carefully crafted sentences first and foremost before you go on to the third, fourth, and fifth part of this scaffolding of rhetoric. The third one is the accumulation of argument. Accumulation of argument. If you want to be influential and persuasive, you have to accumulate the argument over time. And so this is the classic, tell him what you're going to tell him what you came to tell him, and then tell him what you came and told him. Right? Just keep hitting. Winston puts it differently. He says, if you have a point to make, do not be subtle. Hit them over the head with it like a sledgehammer. Tell them again, and then tell them again. And so here's the line that he uses here in the accumulation of argument is Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad sunlit uplands. So he starts by accumulating the argument, saying Hitler knows if he can't beat us, the war is over. And then he goes into, if we can stand up to him here, Europe will be free. And then he goes even further, and life as we know it for everybody will be better, right? So it's an accumulation of argument. Fourth, use of analogy. Use of analogy. So analogy is just a very powerful way of painting a picture in somebody's mind, right? Sometimes you can describe a situation, but if you can compare that to something that they're more familiar with and draw parallels, whether that's a good parallel or a bad parallel, that can be powerful. It just makes the idea sticky that much more. So in this particular line from his speech, he said, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And he's talking about the pilots that sacrificed their life in this war. And what he's doing is he's usually using this analogy of debt owed and honor restored. Like these pilots, they paid the ultimate price, and now it is our debt to be repaid. And you notice, like, these are pretty sophisticated. This isn't some basic B type of stuff. You have to think deeply about this. And that's maybe, if I was to add a sixth layer to this, is that you don't need to be subtle, but don't assume that your audience is stupid either, right? You can have sophisticated analogies here without having to like, so here's the analogy and like throwing it in their face. Sometimes those are a little bit too on the nose. The last one is the deployment of extravagances, deployment of extravagance. So one of the things with Winston is he was not afraid to get pretty hyperbolic and say these things that cast the situation in epic proportions. Because he understood, like, it's very hard to motivate somebody to do something if they do not think the thing is critically important. So if you're trying to get somebody to go and vote, which is a basic thing, right? Like take an hour out of your day and go and vote, right? That's not this epic magnitude proportion thing. If you don't do that, what's a big deal, right? But if you reframe that with this deployment of extravagances, then it's like, if you don't go and vote, like the entirety of human civilization rests on your shoulders. It is your duty as a civilized member of society, a part of the illumination of the future, that you go and you do your duty now. And if you do not, we will fall into darkness, we'll fall into turmoil, and the enemies, our foes, will win, right? So you take this thing and you get extravagant with it. You paint it in these crazy pictures. So here's what Winston here's one of the lines from one of his speeches. "Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves, that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour." If the British Empire is to last for 1,000 more years, they will look back and they will say this was their finest hour. Wow. That doesn't make you want to go fight a war. I don't know what does. So take what you can out of these lessons, go apply them, put in your 1,700 reps, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.